I would like to acknowledge that this video is being filmed on the traditional lands of the Wurrundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander or First Nations people who may be watching this video today. Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Con and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a Books Beside My Bed video for you. This is where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading. And for some reason I decided to lose my voice, but that's okay, we'll fix that. This is my reading week from the 25th until the 31st of March. I am including a reading vlog stats in this video as well. There's a couple of things that I'm going to talk very briefly about and then some books that I'm going to talk about in more depth. I read 12 things within that time period, 3,101 pages, and my yearly reading total is 148 books. So last week I would have shared my 2022 anticipated releases vlog. In that video I read 3 books that fit within this time bracket. There was The Good Girl's Guide to Rakes by Ava Lee, which was a historical romance. There was King's Capture by Vivian Wood, which was a dark contemporary romance, and there was also Weather Girl, which was a contemporary romance story. I will leave that linked on the screen so you can go and check out all of my thoughts. I do talk about those books in far more depth over there. My favourite book from that reading vlog was Weather Girl, which was just a really adorable contemporary romance with matchmaking and really cool characters, but also really fantastic mental health rep. And it was the whole way through the book. The next thing that I read this week was basically binge reading the rest of the Elite Protection series by Onley James, because Onley James's books are very bingeable. They are romances, and this series in particular is bodyguard romances, often with age gaps and lots of daddy kink in them. So they're not very long. They didn't take me very long to read. I'm not going to go through each one specifically. I'll tell you the titles and my favourite one, but basically they all follow a very similar plot thread and they're all connected by the characters, which makes them really fun to read and very easy and quick to read. Book 2 is captivating. Book 3 is exasperating. Book 4 is infuriating. And book 4.5, the novella, was satisfying. As I said, these feature a whole stack of tropes. The one thing I will say though is there is a content warning in the majority of these books for past childhood abuse, either physical or sexual abuse, so there is a lot of trauma that some of these characters are working through. My favourite story in the series was actually the novella, which was 4.5, and it's only tangentially connected to the series. It's sort of characters who have ties to the main characters in the series, but it doesn't link into the sort of deeper story arc sort of setting. The reason I liked it was because this story is a woke up married on Christmas and got snowed in story with these characters who are kind of only just briefly connected to the other ones. The whole thing was honestly just delightful and fun and ridiculous and silly, and that's why I liked that one. Moving on to what I am terming my return to science fiction, or the romance returns to science fiction section of my video, because I read 2 science fiction books this week and I was so thrilled because I enjoyed both of them. The first one was a YA science fiction, which I have not read in the longest time, and this was Gearbreakers, and it's by Zoe Hannah-Makuta. And the reason I picked this up is because it was sold to me as a young adult Pacific Rim inspired story that was leaning towards a sapphic relationship. If that wasn't going to sell me on a book, I don't know what was. So the story is set in this post-apocalyptic world. I should say this is the first book in a series. The world is kind of ruled by this group known as Godolia. They rule through having these giant robots called wind-ups. So if you've seen Pacific Rim, think the big robots from Pacific Rim. Wind-ups are piloted by cybernetically enhanced humans. So they are no longer fully human. They connect to these wind-ups, and when they're not in the wind-ups, they can't feel pain the way that humans do. But when they're in the wind-ups, they feel every bit of pain and damage that their wind-up takes, which is kind of this twisted thing. We find this out through Sona, who is a wind-up pilot who, at the very beginning of the book, wakes up after her operation to cybernetically enhance her body. And we find out that even though she has signed up to be a wind-up pilot, she is actually planning on infiltrating them at the highest level to try and bring down Godolia, because she and her family were affected by their actions. So mostly she's just biding her time. And this all changes when a Gearbreaker, who is one of the rebels who actively climb into wind-ups while they're in motion to bring them down. Eris is captured and is being tortured, and Sona asks to be the one to interrogate her. The two strike up this unlikely, tenuous alliance when Sona reveals that she herself is trying to stop Godolia at the same time. And the two end up escaping, and then Sona has to be accepted into sort of the rebel world because they still see her as someone who is a traitor, someone who is an enemy. There's a lot of complications that come with that. It is a young adult book, so all of these characters are teens, but the whole concept is really, really cool. And my Pacific Rim loving heart loved this. Then I had to take a break from reading things. It was a book that I really wanted to pick up next, but I couldn't because on that particular day of the week, I had an accident at work, so I was injured and not feeling the best. So I just picked up something really short and quick and easy to read, and that was Sated by Rebecca Weatherspoon, which is the third and final book in the Fit trilogy. So I was trying to finish that trilogy reasonably soon. The Fit trilogy follows male fitness instructors who are also heavily involved in the kink BDSM scene. This one, we actually have a female fitness trainer, Kira, who is not at all involved in the fitness scene. In fact, she's a big old geek girl and I love her to pieces. We open the book and she's on a date and it goes horribly wrong. And she's disappointed by this because she was hoping to have a date to go with her to a convention, or to take someone with her to a convention. She's telling this to one of her friends and one of her bosses, Armand, who is the hero from the second book. And he suggests that she meets up with a friend of his who is also going to be attending the convention, and then that way she's got someone to hang out with if she needs to, and Daniel is more than happy to oblige. Daniel is the one who is involved in the kink scene. He is friends with Armand and the hero from the first book, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head. And Kira and Daniel hit it off really well. They get along, they enjoy each other's company at the convention, and then they start to hang out. Turns out Daniel is also the brother of one of the stars of a TV show that Kira is a big fan of, which, you know, is always a bonus. Now, when Armand set them up to attend as friends at the convention, he wasn't trying to set them up. In fact, he pretty much warned Daniel off because while Daniel is into BDSM, he said, you know, Kira is vanilla as, do not go there. In spite of this, they begin to develop feelings and an attraction for one another. We find out Daniel is a switch. We find out that his connection to the BDSM world is slightly different to Armand's, and this has implications on the burgeoning relationship between himself and Kira. So they have a bit to overcome. But I did really enjoy this one. I liked that Kira was a massive geek girl and that she was trying to understand where Daniel was coming from, and that he in turn was trying to understand her as well, and where the balance between the two of them would lie. And then I read one of my other most anticipated books for the year, The Kaiju Preservation Society by John Scalzi. This is a sci-fi story and I loved it. It was my favorite read of the entire week. It is so funny and so entertaining, and if you don't read sci-fi but you like Jurassic Park, Pacific Rim, and Star Wars references, please pick this up because it is utterly delightful. At the start of the book, we meet Jamie, who is our main character and protagonist, and he works in the office for an Uber Eats-like company. We open with his performance review and he gets fired, and we find out that his boss is an absolute jerk. In order to make ends meet, Jamie has to start delivering food for this company, and you know, there's a lot of play around the marketing of these companies, so John Scalzi does an amazing job of just poking fun at a whole lot of real world things that go on. But one night when he is delivering food, Jamie ends up delivering food to an old school friend who in turn happens to need a new assistant for his job at the non-profit that he works for, KPS. He offers Jamie the job because he knows Jamie, he knows that he's a good guy, and he just needs someone to sign on because the previous person has had to drop out. It's a hell of a lot more money, and Jamie agrees. And so he doesn't really know what KPS does. He knows it's a non-profit. He knows that he has to ship out somewhere and that he's going to be cut off from people for about 6 months. And there's a whole group of them who are brand new on this particular trip, and they all meet at the airport, and no one will tell them exactly what is going on because they like to make it a surprise for newcomers or new members of the team. And there's a whole lot of scientists and people involved, and as it turns out, they end up on a parallel Earth where humans never evolved, but Kaiju did. So Kaiju, big monsters. The KPS, or the Kaiju Preservation Society, is there to study the environment, to study the Kaiju, and also to preserve and protect this alternate Earth, because there are ways to travel between our Earth and their Earth, and they're trying to stop people from exploiting them. So basically they're trying to wrangle the governments and all the people, all the investors, by studying and sending back results and research, but not letting them come over and sort of micromanage that in the way that, you know, billionaires totally would. Of course, one said less than altruistic billionaire, aka the guy that fired Jamie at the start of the book, ends up coming over to this parallel Earth, and things ensue. The whole thing is just glorious and funny. There are so many references. Like, they actually reference Jurassic Park and Pacific Rim and Star Wars because they live in a village that's very Ewok-like, and the whole thing, I loved that scene. But it is so funny. I cannot tell you how cleverly written this book is. There are just so many nods to things going on in the world, and I loved it. It was honestly so delightful to read. Katie Robert also released her Patreon short at the end of the month, and that was St. Patrick's Day in the Underworld. This was an Aurora and Malone short story that was more slice of life than anything else, so not a huge amount happened in it. We just got to revisit quite a few characters and check in on Aurora and Malone. That was about it. I mean, there's not much more to say. And the final book that I read this week was I Married a Minotaur by Regine Abel. This is the 5th book in the Prime Mating Agency series, and for this book we return to one of the alien worlds that we had previously been on in I Married a Birdman, which was my favourite story in the series so far, so I was very excited to be back there. The story opens with Rihanna, the heroine, who is waiting transportation to a prison planet because she has been accused of a crime she didn't commit. She's a smuggler, but her business partner framed her for something, and the Prime Mating Agency steps in and offers her a deal. If she will marry Zatruk, who is an orc/minotaur type being, for 1 year, her prison sentence will be commuted. In the end, she agrees, and she goes and she meets Zatruk, and she finds him fascinating, even though, you know, he's huge and she's very tiny. She begins to discover a lot about his people, in that they are inherently a violent race. It has to do with their genetics and their body makeup, but Zatruk is trying to change the way his people are perceived, and also trying to find a way to better manage the behavior, because they have typically been known to start wars for the sake of it, because it's just, you know, part of their culture, their way. And he wants to change that, and he wants to channel it into something better to protect his people and to protect their children. And so he begins to share his ambitious plan with Rihanna, and she is only too eager to help get it off the ground. And then they begin to reconnect with characters from previous book as well in order to make that happen. And I really enjoyed this one. It was nice to be back there. I didn't enjoy it as much as I Married a Birdman, but this one was, you know, not far behind that in terms of enjoyment level. Those are the books that I have read in the last 7 days. In the comments, I would love to hear if you have read any of them, or if you're planning on picking them up. Or alternatively, feel free to share what you have been reading as well. If you want to let me know that you're here but you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to leave a robot emoji down below. Otherwise, I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.